When the weatherman says it's going to be partly cloudy, partly sunny, and we're going to have a breeze of 10 to 15 miles an hour, and it's fall time to get out the spinnerbaits. And you know, they're so complicated. You go to a store and they got different blade combinations, different skirt colors, all different situations. I'm going to try to explain how to fish a variety of situations today with a spinnerbait, looking at the water clarity. And looking at the water clarity, when I got here, I looked and I said, this is clearer water. I'm going to use something like a chartreuse type of skirt, okay? And I had a couple of variations, not many, a couple of variations. You can see they're almost identical. And the white one, we're going to go white one. But take a look at the blades. I'm looking at willow leaf blades, because I want that bait to go through the water really, really fast when this water's clear. I'm going to talk about the 4 C's of spinnerbaits that'll help you remember and help you decide which one is right for the conditions that you're fishing. There's one, kind of feel them load. Now that one I popped it, paused it, but you know, again, another 12-13 inch fish. I like these kind of conditions when I'm fishing a lake that has clear water, primarily because what I look for with spinnerbaits is the 4 C's. These are the ideal situations for spinnerbaits. I've got choppy water, I've got cloudy skies, I'm close to the fish because I'm going to be fishing either wood or grass, but the last C is cloudy or stained water. I don't have that. But there's a spinnerbait that works for this. I got to tell you that one of the smartest guys in the fishing industry, and one of the most liked, is a guy named Alan McGuckin. And he worked for a spinnerbait company. I think it was Terminator back in the day. And what he did is on the back of a spinnerbait package, he had the blade combinations and the skirt colors to use with different conditions. So you would go like, well, okay, my lake is generally muddy. I'm going to need the vibration, the Colorado, Indiana, or my lake is clean water. I'll be throwing a double willow combination. So what I've done over the years is to kind of, focus on that and pay attention to what works when and start to make adjustments in my spinnerbaits. I'll go home and I've got boxes of blades and clevises and swivels and everything else that you need to make a spinnerbait. The skirt material, that was one that hit me there. Spinnerbait material and everything that I need to build a spinnerbait. I've got my colors that I can use with powder coating, and I just come back after a trip and I start to fine tune for different parts of the country, different waters. For the Potomac River, I fish a different color than I do the mountain lakes in West Virginia or Lake Anna or any of those other lakes. What I'm throwing today, when the water's clear like this, I like to go with a bright color. So I go with either the bright green, the bright yellow, chartreuse, and for a little contrast, I throw a couple of strands of black in there just to have some contrast. The head, a little chartreuse, a little yellow, red eyes, and you don't get too fancy on that sort of stuff. But what I've got today, I'm using 2 different spinnerbaits, basically the same spinnerbait, but a little bit different. I have got one blade a little smaller to make the bait go faster. It allows it to go faster. When you are in the fall and you've got fish that are feeding, they're still pretty active and they'll chase. But with a spinnerbait, you don't want them to get a good look at the spinnerbait. So you want something that's going to go really fast in this clear water. And the smaller willows will do that. If you use a Colorado and you try to go fast, or an Indiana try to go fast, it brings the bait up to the surface. It kind of makes the bait lift. It adds lift to that bait, and it'll make it go close to the surface. I want it to still run, 4 or 5 feet deep. One thing you'll see me do every once in a while is just sort of snap the rod a little bit. That does 3 things really. If it picks up any grass, it shakes the grass off. 2, it adds a trigger to the fish so that they'll see something erratic and they'll try to get it. But the third thing is that it'll get the skirt material to make sure it lays in the right place. You don't want the skirt material up on the top end of the bait like that. because that'll affect the way it runs. So by shaking it a couple times, it'll drop that skirt material for you. So nothing fancy on this spinnerbait. Again, I'm going with kind of like the bright colors. There we go, came off that piece of wood. Get him out of that wood. So we're catching them in a variety of conditions or situations. We're catching them on wood, we're catching them on grass, we're catching them in edges of grass, in deep grass. So they're pretty much everywhere, and you've just got to keep throwing this thing till you find out where they are. And long casts are great in clear water. It's always a good idea to go with the longer cast. The fish don't see you, and they don't get spooked as easy. But that chop on the water, it's a good thing today. Cloudy sky is a good thing, and we're close to the fish with this. And so not having that cloudy water, which is ideal for spinner baits, because then you just slow it down, you bump against cover. Here the fish are going to move around a bit. With the water being clearer, they'll move around chasing bait, and with the chop on the water, they'll be a little bit more aggressive. There we go. Another little guy. We're catching all the little ones. We want to catch the bigger ones. We want to catch bigger ones. We want bigger ones. Show us your leader. And I'm just looking for open spots in this flat, just because mechanically I get my spinnerbait through it a little bit easier. Length of my skirt, a lot of guys, you know, when they buy a spinnerbait, the skirt's probably about 2 or 3 inches too long, and they just leave it that way, and they start fishing with it like that. Well, don't do that. Trim it up. I like to have mine trimmed about a 1/2 inch. I'll start a 1/2 inch from the bend of the hook. So what happens is if I start getting short strikes, I'll shorten it up a little bit, if the water's really clear, I go with it a little bit shorter. Then I go with a longer one. If the water's a little muddy, I give them a bigger target. Wind blowing across the lake today. We're expecting, 10 to 15 mile an hour wind, which to me says, hey, you look at the weather forecast, you know the time of the year, you approximately know the conditions you're going to have, but that's when I go, I got to get my spinnerbait out. As far as rods go, I've been using the G Loomis spinnerbait rods, about 6'9", 6'10". They're long enough to make long casts. They're also short enough that if I want to just sort of roll cast it into a specific spot, I can do that as well. I like the tip to be a little bit softer so that it can cast the spinnerbait well. And I will do, like right now, the wind is at my back, which is fine. I can cast this thing a mile. And I'll have the spinnerbait maybe 6 inches from the tip of the rod when I make my cast. I mean, when the wind is blowing into my face and I've got to cast into the wind, what I'll do is I'll have maybe 2 or 3 feet of line. I'll have something like that. That'll get me enough momentum with this rod to allow that bait to take off into the wind. Otherwise, they kind of helicopter. When the wind hits them, they helicopter. They get different resistance, and they're really hard to cast. So you got to kind of keep your casts a little bit lower when you're casting into the wind. Take a little bit off of them. You don't have to cast them as far as you thought you would have to, but just keep the bait moving. Keep the bait moving. And this is the kind of thing where, I mean, in a massive grass bed like this, I am just going to keep moving around. Just keep moving around and try to find those active fish. And you got to be ready too, because a lot of times they'll bite at the right when the bait hits the water, which is why I like to use Gamma Edge fluorocarbon. I've got one rod here with 10, one with 12. That's more or less to control the depth of the bait. 10-pound test is plenty strong. 12 is all you really need, unless you're in Florida fishing for 10-pounders that are going to wrap you up in something. Also, no need to put the electronics on when you're fishing. open area grass beds like this. You can see what's down there pretty much. You know that you're in water that's pretty shallow. And you want to retrieve it pretty fast. Pretty fast. I mean, you're not going to go too fast for these fish. And if you start getting some short strikes, like I've had 2 short strikes so far, and I might either go a little bit faster, or I might, there was another one, or I might shorten my skirt just a skosh. Let's see if we can catch some of these fish that are short striking. We'll go a little bit faster this time, see what happens. And I like the high-speed reels, 7-to-1 and faster. In the old days, we only had 6 3-to-1. That was our fast one in the old days. Now you go 7, 8, little increments in between. And you also make sure your baits run straight too. Tuning a spinnerbait, I've done a lot of seminars on that. I'll go over that here once I do tune a spinnerbait, because there's basically some bending that you need to do, not only to make the blades run straight, but also for your hook set. You want to make sure that the bend of the spinnerbait, if you have an R bend like this one is, that bend is in line with the hook point. So you'll have to bend the wire up or down that comes out of the head of the spinnerbait to achieve that. And that's for hook sets. If fish bites, you want to be able to meet them with opposite force to penetrate that hook. There's one right there. Oh, didn't catch up to him. Need a faster reel. I like to start the spinnerbait retrieve with my rod up. That makes sure I get everything lined up on that spinnerbait, and then kind of feel for the grass and lower it as I get closer to the grass. If you're going to have your rod up like this, you better be ready with a real fast reel and hook set, because those fish are going to put slack in your line. You won't be able to get a good hook set into them. Ideally, you want to have your rod tip down, but if you're going too deep, you're going to have to raise that rod tip up just a little bit, keep that spinnerbait just on the top of the grass. You don't need to be going through the grass, just over the top of it, just nicking it every once in a while. And these fish will come up. This is the time of the year where they're feeding, they're chasing bait. With the cloud cover, they'll be up shallow. They'll be up real shallow looking for food. And I've chosen these bright colored skirts because they show up really well. Fish will see them. Darker strands for contrast. A lot of guys will talk about the thin wire. You want a thin wire spinnerbait. Generally speaking, yeah, but when I'm burning, I just use, I've got these old Strike King, and they hold up real well, and I'm just burning it through there. I'm not looking to produce a lot of vibration. This is all about flash and something going by that they can't stop themselves, and they just want to eat it. There's another thick grass mat right about there. There's a fish, almost on cue, right? Hi fishy. Let's get another one. There's that grass, that thick grass. Let's see if we get another one come out of there. The other thing too, I like to see my spinnerbait and then a little bit deeper than that, because that tells me that there's light getting to those blades and creating the kind of flash that I'm looking for. If I can see that, then I know the light is getting to it. That bait's running a little bit sideways, so it either has grass on it. We'll lift it up real slow and see what it is. See, this is what it was. Remember I talked about the skirt not laying down, so a couple snaps of the rod and it'll pull it down and it'll run for you perfectly. I also use wire to secure my skirts. I used to like the rubber band things, but they rot and the strands tend to come undone, and unless you end up stocking, several spinnerbaits in your boat or extra skirts, you don't need to do that with when you put the wire on it. It pretty much keeps your spinnerbait together, and you could use it all day long and catch fish with the same spinnerbait. And I know a lot of guys like me, we're superstitious. if we're catching them on a spinnerbait, we don't want, even if we got one that's exactly the same, we don't want to switch. We want to keep throwing that spinnerbait until the blades fall off. Wind's blowing pretty good right now. Not too hard to fish in, and at the same time creating a chop on the water. So it decreases the light penetration. Fish don't get a really good look at it, and they'll eat it. But that decreased light penetration encourages bait fish to swim around because they don't have a spotlight on them. I always give a quick look at my spinnerbait, make sure there's nothing on it, and that's in, you know, not bent, skirt's not all tangled up. I kind of give it a quick glance before I make a cast. The other thing you want to watch for, sometimes your spinnerbait will roll and then this line will wrap around it, so I just kind of look at that and make sure my knot's in pretty good shape. And because I'm coming through all that grass and everything, I also make sure the line doesn't get nicked up. Grass will nick up your line, contrary to popular belief. I might trim. I've got almost an inch of skirt below my hook. I might cut that another 1/8, maybe 1/4 of an inch, so it's just a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch down. The other thing guys forget to do is sharpen these hooks. I mean, they go, oh, it's spinnerbait, you know, but no, you sharpen that hook, make sure you keep a point on it. Now this will work if it's a little sunny, so don't worry about that, but as long as it's not bluebird skies, definitely these three conditions, the clear water, chop on the water, and partly cloudy skies. That'll help you with this. Also keep in mind shade is shade, or if there's different water colorations, those are edges. The bass will be on the edges of those. They might even be up in the shade. So just take your casts, kind of, you know, you can cast as many times as you want. Cover the area, just keep it going. No need to take a break. It's fishing. That faster retrieve reel when the bait gets close to you allows you to bring it in faster so that you can make another cast too, so you can really speed it up when you get out of what you think is a strike zone. If you start getting fish biting you at the boat, well, hey, that's not a bad thing. I think that means you need to reel faster because they're following it too far, unless you're like around something, a piece of cover that you didn't see, or the fish decide to come off of it at the last minute and hit your bait. But most of the time they're following. What we got here? This is what happens. You get these little guys. Remember I said we're getting a lot of little guys? There he goes. You can feel him nip, 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 nip. And that one hit it pretty much as soon as it hit the water. I could tell it wasn't grass, and I could barely feel a wiggle. So that guy got his initiation to spinnerbaits. He's probably going to remember that for a long time. Likely not. Nobody's throwing spinnerbaits anymore. It's not something you use with forward-facing sonar. And it's one of these baits that, you know, guys that are starting off that don't want to use forward-facing sonar, or you want to, you know, be able to be a balanced fisherman and use forward-facing but also use traditional techniques. You're not hearing a lot about it. You're not seeing a lot. I mean, this is one of these it's going to be an old school technique. You know, they'll have a museum and they'll go, what's that? Oh, that's a spinnerbait. Guys used to throw that and catch bass with it. Oh, really? Yeah, look at it. That's really fancy, isn't it? Yeah. But anyway, it still catches fish. It'll catch them pretty much everywhere. And again, not a lot of guys are throwing them anymore, so it's not like the fish have seen them. So you go someplace that maybe gets fished a lot, but they're not using spinnerbaits because nobody really has the confidence in them. You're not seeing them on the pro tours. You're not seeing a lot of magazine articles or videos done on them. So a lot of guys will say, gee, I'll pass on this. And it's showing. Tackle stores are just not selling as many hard baits, spinner baits, all those kinds of baits as they used to sell. Okay, wind, I want you to blow. I want the wind to blow. oxygenates the water, blows the plankton, zooplankton, so that starts the food chain going pretty good. So a lot of good things happen when it gets windy, in addition to the light penetration issue that we were talking about. So now I'm casting into the wind, and what I'm trying to do is cut across the wind. So don't want to throw this thing straight into the wind, but kind of a little bit lower cast, a little bit shorter cast, but cut across the wind. The wind's blowing this way, so I want to cut across the wind, rather than throwing straight into the wind. Although I can, I just won't throw it as far. Spinnerbait allows you to really cover water and kind of either pick off the most aggressive fish or figure out after a few catches where the fish are, what they're relating to, the depth they're at, what speed you need to be going. And those are always the things that you think about, is depth and speed, how deep and how fast. We're not going to count that one. Hey, grow up. I like to have the rod kind of straight in front of me. I hold it in my left hand, so I have it across my body, so the tip is basically around the center of my body. So it goes from my left hand to across the center. If I get a bite and he pulls to the left, I can set it to the right. If I get a bite and he pulls to the right, I can set it to the left. If he stops it, I could go straight up. But if I'm retrieving with my rod at a 90-degree angle, it eliminates a lot of those hook sets. So just kind of try to do that. That'll give you, my dominant hook set is to the right. So, having that thing across the front of my body like that is a natural position. I can see the rod tip, I can see the line, everything lines up. It's also good for hook sets. Okay, we got a couple of stick-em-ups over there. We'll come down the side of them and see what happens. There's one right on the side of the stick-em-up. Oh, it's a good one. Yeah, come on here, fishy. Okay, I don't know if you saw that. That fish jumped, and I kept reeling as fast as I could, took the slack out of the line, kept the rod tight on him. It's about a 13-inch fish. We'll take that. Pretty fish, healthy fish, spinnerbait. We got you. Kind of where we thought he'd be, kind of like right next to that stick up there. And I didn't slow down when I got to it. I kept it going. Okay, someone's going to say, well, why isn't he using a trailer hook? Trailer hooks. Well, can't throw it around wood. Hard to throw it around grass. So it's a good open water deal. I try to find something else that's going to make these things eat it. Sometimes a softer rod will help. If they're just coming up nipping it, the rod might be pulling it away from them. So going to a softer rod sometimes helps. How does that help, you say? So the fish comes up and they use the technique of ram suction before they attack any moving bait. They come flying up, but right before they ram it, they open their mouths and they suck it in. And if your rod is too stiff and they're not really that aggressive, then the rod won't allow the fish to suck it in. The rod will pull back away from the fish, so they won't be able to suck it in. If that's the case, sometimes going to a softer rod when you're throwing a spinnerbait is a good deal. Now, keep in mind that you're going to have a very fast reel, definitely going to need fluorocarbon line, and you better be able to load that rod with the reel and then set the hook. So it's a little bit different technique as far as your hook set goes. Most of the time with spinnerbait, guys go, oh, they just crush it. Well, sometimes they don't. Like we've seen today, probably had about 20 bites where they just sort of snapped at it. There's one. Kind of feel them load. Now that one, I popped it, paused it. I don't know that we're figuring anything out except that we just keep doing the same thing and eventually we get one that commits to it. But you know, again, another 12-13 inch fish. All right, there we go. That's a better fish, better than those 5-inch fish that we've been catching. We get a 12-inch fish. All right, we'll take it. 12-inch fish, not bad when you're trying to catch 12-inch fish, right? The whole point is that you've got conditions that you got sun, you got chop on the water, water's a little bit off color, and we're throwing a spinnerbait. We're trying to get flash and speed to let these fish chase it and get it, and that's all you have to do is find the right depth and right speed, and you can catch them. Goodbye, fishy. The whole idea is to get out here and learn how to throw spinnerbaits, and learn that there are different spinnerbaits for different conditions, and throw them. Learn to throw them, because when the big fish are biting these things, maybe a little later this fall, you'll have experience. You'll know how to snap it out of the grass. You'll feel comfortable in choosing your own spinnerbait. But get out there when you have at least 2 out of the 4 C's. At least you have some chop. That's the number one thing. Number 2, some clouds. So clouds, so chop, clouds, and you're close to the fish. If the water is dirty, that's even better. If it's crystal clear, it gets a little bit tougher, but you can still catch them. But just get experience in using them and confidence in throwing them, and then it's a matter of picking up the right one and then adjusting the right depth and speed with this. And I've gone to a faster spinnerbait. Some smaller willow blades, they're like number 4s and maybe a little bit smaller than a 4. On this particular bait, I've gone to 4.5 and 5 on some of them and done okay. You just got to experiment. But the color of the skirt, I think, is also kind of key. It's kind of that bright yellow, the bright green, a little bit of black thrown in there for a little bit of contrast, and you should be okay. Someone also asked me about do I put a trailer, not a trailer hook, but do I put a trailer like a grub or something on there? If I'm going for buoyancy, that helps. But when I'm trying to go for speed, that's not going to help. That's just going to make the bait rise a little bit more. If I'm slow rolling it, big thumping bait, and I'm only fishing a couple feet deep, I might add something just to add more bulk to it to make it easier for the fish to find it. But as a rule, no, I don't put anything on there. Used to, done it, and just never found, after I quit doing it, never found like I wanted to go back to it. There we go. That guy followed it and finally ate it right near the boat, which is okay. Again, I've been doing a lot of snaps in this. I've been just snapping it, trying to trigger them to bite. That one barely 12, maybe 11.5. Checking the bait now, make sure that the bait is aligned and everything is where it needs to be. The hook seems to be pretty sharp, so I don't want to shorten the skirt too much more after this. I'm going to fill you in on something that'll help you when you're fishing with a buddy and your buddy's catching fish and you're not. You're throwing relatively the same thing. It's got to be something in the presentation. So there are 2 things you can watch. Watch his hands, or her hands, and that'll tell you if they're doing something like the speed, or if they're cranking fast and then slowing down or stopping. And so watch the hands. The hands are the dead giveaway for something like that. When you're watching pros that are fishing, you're watching a fishing show on TV, watch that, okay? See what they're actually doing, not what they're telling you they're doing, but what they're actually doing. The other thing, in addition to watching their hands, watch their rod. Do they have the rod up? Do they have it down? Are they snapping? Are they pulling? What are they doing to get those fish to bite? Because they're doing something. If you're throwing about, everything's the same, okay? So watch the hands and watch the rod. What do we got here? We got fishy. We got Mr. Bass. There we go. Nice easy stroke. Spinnerbait fish. But you just have to keep casting it. I'm casting into the wind, along a grass edge, and you just keep casting, keep casting. Okay, I'm gonna show you how I tie the knot for the spinnerbait. I'm gonna double the line. This is a Palomar knot, okay, but I'm gonna double the line, leave about a foot of line. And there's a step that's really important in this. So I'm gonna tie my overhead knot. You can see I'm leaving a lot of line there. Now, when I pull this loop, I'm gonna pass the hook side in first. Grab the line, pull it over the blades, and then take the tag line, wet it down, pull it tight, and there's my Palomar knot. The idea is that you want to go through the side with the hook on it, because if you don't, when you come through, that hook will be exposed and you'll catch it 9 times out of 10. But if you do it that way, you're going to protect that, and you're all set and ready to go again. Tune it, tuned up fine, ready to cast and see if we can get another fishy. Right here at the boat, little guy. But we'll take them. We're just trying to show you how to use a spinnerbait. Vary your presentations, your speed, your depth, sometimes your color, sometimes your blades. You could start with an educated guess and then go from there. There we go, came off that piece of wood. Get him out of that wood. So we're catching them in a variety of conditions or situations. We're catching them on wood, we're catching them on grass, we're catching them in edges of grass, in deep grass. So they're pretty much everywhere, and you gotta keep throwing this thing till you find out where they are. Well, I'd say that's a pretty successful day out on the water. We caught a lot of fish. Got to show you how to use the spinnerbait, because if you don't know how to use it and the big ones are biting it, you're going to be at a loss. So get out there when you know you can catch fish with a spinnerbait. Try the different combinations of blades that we talked about and see if you can improve each time you go out, so that when the bigger fish start biting, and we're talking that could be happening anytime in the late fall all the way into the early spring, depending on what you're fishing, how you're fishing, and the water temperature. I'm Captain Steve Chaconis. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and tell your friends about us.